welcome to day 4. Today we're going to be doing quilting with paper. We're going to be using the stack of prints from Stampin' Up. And the stack is 4.5 by 6.5 inches. You're going to cut strips of 3/4 of an inch each on the 6.5 side. And just glue it to a piece of computer paper. Just make sure that when you glue the sticks, they are all different, one from the other. Don't glue sticks that are the same side by side. Then you're going to cut those strips in 3/4 of an inch again on the long side. You're going to get a whole bunch of strips that we're going to be quilting. And now we are doing some embossing on Rio Red using the embossing body to prepare for the powder. And I'm using the um, Jolly Jingles wheel that I mounted. There's a video about that on the link on my blog if you want to look at it. And partial stamping. So you're going to put the Versamark pad only on top of the part of the stamp that you want to emboss. So if you take a look at that, I'm just putting the stamp pad on top of that right portion of the wheel and stamping onto the cardstock. Sorry for the camera shake there. So after that, I will be putting some white embossing powder, sprinkling it on, making sure everything is coated the way it should, and then melting the embossing powder. Make sure that you move the heat gun all the time so to prevent warping of the cardstock. If it warps a little bit, it's fine. You just don't want a lot of warping. So now you need another piece of computer paper. That computer paper is 4 3/4 by 3 3/4. I cut it actually a little bit bigger, 5 by 4, and then trimmed it down, and then put very strong adhesive all around it and in the middle because we're going to be doing the quilting on that piece of paper. And because I will be gluing those strips of paper on top of that base, I'll use some dodo adhesive on my work surface so it doesn't move as much, even though I'm going to be moving the paper later on, but it really helps. So you're going to get those strips that we had cut before and just start aligning from left to right. I'm going to start with the first strip on the left corner and down as straight as you can. And then the second strip, I'm going to turn it upside down, so 90 degrees. The trick about quilting with paper in this case is that you don't want any of the squares to be the same when you put it side by side. So you will see that I'm going to move up 1 square for every strip. So there's no coincidence between those prints, just like when you're actually quilting. So the third one, if you notice, I'm just moving it 1 square up. If you take a look, you'll see that the third strip looks exactly like the first one. So to stagger it, I'm just going to keep moving it up. So the fourth one, I'm going to move 2 squares up. I didn't cut any of the film there, so you see exactly how I'm doing it. Make sure that when you put the strips together, you butt them up really well so you don't see any seams, any white seams underneath. So you just keep going up. So that other one is actually turned again 90 degrees. So you can put it in the same position. And then the next one, we're going to do 2 squares up. There you go. So you're going to then cover the whole little piece of paper using the same technique. After this, once you do this, the 2 squares up, you can continue going up and then down again, and then trim it around it. So the final size is 4 3/4 by 3 3/4. Also, don't get rid of the leftover of that you're cutting of the strips, because you can use it to make another card just like that, or a different card that I'm going to be showing later on the same series. So that quilt portion is going to go on top of a gumball green piece of cardstock, and we're going to mount then the red part on top. I have a transparent button there from Stampin' Up, but I didn't want to use it just transparent, so I decided to stamp a snowflake on top using Stays On, white Stays On. And as you know, white Stays On needs to be re-inked every time you use it. You just get the re-inker and just squish it to the ink pad and use the tip to spread the ink. I'm just going to be using that portion of it for the snowflake. So this is I'm just going to re-ink half of the ink pad, but you do have to do that every time. Stamping on buttons is a really good idea when you want to add some, something different to the button or give it some interest, like in this case, for example. You just ink up the stamp and just stamp on top of the button. Remove it and then let it dry for a little while. As you can see, I have a couple of other different buttons. The way I um, make bows on a button, I thread the baker's twine, and then I use glue dots to adhere it to the cardstock before I do the bow. I find it easier for me to do that. And you can see that I made some leaves there, but I end up not using them, at least not on this card. So I threaded some baker's twine on that green button as well, and adhere it to the top of the rear red card. And now I'm going to mount the red portion of the card with some foam. Um, I like doing that because I like the different uh, volume, or um, I don't like flat cards unless I'm going to mail them. So if you're going to mail them, it's totally fine. You really don't have to use it. It's just my personal preference. So gonna mount that. And once I mounted it, I realized that it's to actually look like a quilt, you should have some stitching, or in this case, faux stitching. So if you come across a card that you already mounted and you need stitching on it, instead of actually taking it to your sewing machine, you can do some faux stitching with the white gel pen, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm decided to do faux stitching around the rear red cardstock, and also around the green base, just to give it more of a quilt look. Uh, Another thing to keep in mind is that if you're going to do that, make sure it's pretty much the last thing you do because the gel pen takes a little while to dry. And then I realized that two buttons were not okay, so I decided to add another button, a white one, just to bring the white out of the prints to the top of the card. So that's it. I hope you enjoy it and you join me tomorrow again for another card. Thank you.